Hello everyone, welcome to South News. I'm Fav Kanja. Joining us today is the permanent representative of Afghanistan to the United Nations, Dr. Zahir Tanin. Ambassador, welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. From the top, as the chair of the intergovernmental negotiations on Security Council reform, can you please give us an update on these negotiations? How long have member states been calling for reform? And are there any tangible updates you can give us today?
It has been long that the reform of the Security Council has been debated in one or another form in the United Nations. The member states wanted a reformed council and discussed that in the last 20 years. But the negotiations, the intergovernmental negotiations that I'm chairing has started in 2009, and still we are discussing and negotiating the positions. And now we are in the fourth year of these negotiations. We had 8 rounds of debates, and that led to the creation of a negotiating text. The revision third of that negotiation text is available to the member states. We are just now in the middle of the 8th round, as I said, where we are looking into the positions of different member states in an interactive way, and trying to see whether some sort of agreement or outcome would emerge through this exercise at this stage.
As chair, what would a reformed Security Council look like? And for example, what are the core obstacles to achieving this? We've got these regions, Africa, etc. What are the core obstacles? And if ideally we'd have a reformed Security Council, what would that be?
It's a big question, but to answer that, let me say first that a reform council, in the view of different groups of the countries, can be seen differently. But the issues we discuss here and the member states are focused on is about a expansion of the council, the size of the council, the representation of the regions, the issues like veto, the relations of the council and the General Assembly, and through that, in a way, we are looking into 2 main issues: the enlargement and the working methods. So, at the same time, the whole premises based on the idea that how today's council would be able to reflect the new realities, the changing realities, because the council, or today's council, was established just after the Second World War in 1945, and it was slightly reformed in 1960s, but it doesn't reflect the changes that happened during all last 65 years. And as we know, the world has moved from the post-Second World War to the post-Second World War, the world has moved from, as we know, the world has moved from post-Second World War to post-Cold War in 1990s, to post 9/11, and also to post Arab Spring time. So through these examples, what I say is, and what I'm trying to say is, that the world has been changed geo-economically, geopolitically, strategically, and not only at global level, but at regional levels also. So People would like to see a council that is more representative, more connected to the new realities of the world, more open, more transparent, and also efficient through better representation.
Ambassador, is it realistic to say that some kind of reform could take place tangibly in real terms in the next 10 years?
What are the obstacles, and should we be optimistic in a reform of the Council in a reasonably near future? There are different positions, whether it's the issue of enlargement or whether it is the working methods. In principle, when it comes to the reform itself and the need of reform, everybody, including P5, they agree that the reform is needed. The problem is how to get there. This negotiation is about how to bring positions closer to each other. I think we succeeded in creating a common ground of talking. But of course, if you ask me whether we are very close to an outcome, I can say that we are very close, and at the same time we are not very close. Which means that when it comes to the contours of an agreement, it can be worked out through the negotiations as soon as possible. It wouldn't take long. Negotiations are negotiations. You need to deal. You need to look into all positions and find out how you can enlarge the Council, how you bring new categories, how you deal with the representation issue, how you improve the working method. But at the same time, to do that, which makes you or take you very closer to an agreement, to an outcome, it's about the political willingness. And we live in a world, and also we deal with an organization that is, while it's based on the principle of equality, but it is not ignorant of the differences of positions of the countries. There are powerful countries, there are weak countries, and it matters. So in the UN, it's also important that all stakeholders, all parties to these negotiations would come to a willingness for agreement before agreeing on something.
Really, from your perspective as the permanent representative of Afghanistan to the United Nations, in how the Security Council actually has addressed and is addressing conflict and instability in Afghanistan, has that influenced your perspective on the Security Council?
Representing a country, as you said, is in direct relation with the Council. The presence of international forces in Afghanistan is based on Security Council resolution. So Afghanistan is still covered under Chapter 7. So Afghanistan is discussed every 3 months in the Council now. And then there are two mandates that the Council should decide about it every year. The mandate of the UN presence in Afghanistan and the mandate of international assistance forces. So you're right that we deal with the Council. We are in a way a client of the Council. When it comes to Afghanistan, of course, there is a partnership. In the last 10 years, we were here, we supported the UN, we supported the Security Council, we tried to be part of all negotiations of resolutions. But at the same time, I think on the basis of my own understanding from the work of the Council, not only as an ambassador of Afghanistan, but also as ambassador of a G7 plus, the fragile countries, and with a very better understanding of the post-conflict situations, which I have my own understanding of the conflicts, not only Afghanistan, but what happened in other places in Asia, in Africa. So I think especially in a post-Cold War, post-9/11, in a different world where the issues of the conflict and post-conflict situations is heavily influencing the agenda of the Council, it's very important to see how the decisions of the Council is effective, how it affects the life of people, how it helps many countries that are still struggling for standing on their feet, and also how it is seen by people, these decisions, as a legitimate one, acceptable one, helpful one. So the democratization of the Council, the legitimacy of its decision, or the perception of its legitimate decisions, are very serious in the eyes of not only the states, but also in the eyes of the millions of people in the streets. How they see these decisions, whether it's about Gaza or about Palestinian territories in occupation, or conflict situations in Africa, post-election difficulties in a post-conflict or conflict-affected country. It is important for all people to see the Council as an international high body that dealing with issues with a just, fair, and democratic way.
So I have to ask you then, on Afghanistan's development, let's cross over here a bit, but still tangible to my previous question to you. So do you see some of the work, of course, not only the Security Council, but of course the United Nations as a whole, in terms of the development assistance strategies when it comes to Millennium Development Goals, for example, and achieving those, especially being a least developed country? Ambassador, how has the UN, Security Council, and of course the government itself, because the sole legitimate responsibility does come from the government, and developing such strategies for really, truly sustainable development?
In situations we live, in situations we were, and we are, in post-conflict situations, in conflict situations, or even in countries that are not in conflict but least developed. Or countries that can be seen as fragile states. In all of these situations, I think the UN is playing an important role due to the lack of capacities in these countries, the destruction of infrastructure, the absence of enough resources, the loss of national resources due to the historical
it's been, what, 3 decades now, right?
I'm not talking only about Afghanistan. I'm talking about the whole, this LDC, this development, post-conflict situation. When it comes to Afghanistan, I have to share with you our experience that Afghanistan, after 30 years, like other countries, but very in a unique situation, lost infrastructure. Millions of people left the country as refugees. The best brains of the countries left to Europe, to America, to other places. All schools, hospitals, and roads, whatever we built through a 100 years of attempts towards modernization were lost through this destructive wars, conflicts, and foreign occupations. Only in Afghanistan, in 1980s, 1990s, some 3,000 schools were burned or destroyed. So in the last 10 years, it took us a lot of energy to rebuild the roads, to rebuild the the schools, the hospitals, the clinics.
Listening to President Karzai during the LDC conference in Istanbul, a lot of progress has been made. Schools, infrastructure, highways, etc. So not to take away from all of that, as you're saying.
The damage is estimated some $300 billion. In the face of that, what we have done in the last 10 years, it is unprecedented, and it is very important. Thousands of roads were built, hundreds of schools were established, clinics, and also we returned the normal economy to the country, and of course it was not possible without that partnership between Afghanistan and the international community. In that partnership, UN played an important role as a lead civilian international coordinator. That coordinator is needed. The support is needed. Support for governance, support for development, support for rule of law, because they have the experience, they have the skill, and they have the know-how. So that is what the international community, in particularly the UN, can bring. Not only the political UN, but the development UN. And we have 33 UN entities, funds, and programs that are active in Afghanistan. There is one danger for Afghanistan, for the United Nations, for the international community, that this enabling role shouldn't become a permanent enabling role, because then you will face another problem, which is the dependency of the national governments to the international organizations. So we have to find a balance and see how we benefit from the international assistance, and this benefit would be an enabling role, and we have to have the national governments as soon as we can to stand on their feet, to be in the driving seat, and to run the country, and this national government shouldn't be always looking into the helps that to come or depend to that one. Of course, it's a process, it takes time, but what is important, what we learn from our situation is the partnership. This partnership should be constructive, workable, and also there are, if the national government, if the international community are not looking into the future and into the effectiveness of their work, they don't have a prospective view about it, then maybe we at the end we will be not in a situation to see the national governments and the national economies to work independently.
What is your greatest challenge as an advocate for the people and, of course, the government of Afghanistan? And what do you want our South News viewers to know about Afghanistan and your focus and your passion today?
The Afghan people would like to work with the international community as they partnered themselves voluntarily 10 years ago. Afghans welcomed the intervention of the international community, which helped to remove the Taliban regime and to begin a new life. It has been 10 years. We human beings tend to forget, and we in the business of politics also tend to don't remember in which context we work. So the past legacy was so heavy. Sometimes it looks that this 10 years in Afghanistan was too long. But in fact, building a destroyed state takes longer than people imagine. My biggest fear is that this donor fatigue will undermine what we have done together. Sometimes there is a feeling to flee from from the trouble, to escape. And through that, you can sometimes see that the issue, the country you have to work with, that also flee from the conscious grasp. My big fear is, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's any other country where we go, we spend money, we sweat, energy, lives, and then we start to go out, to want to then we start to see an immediate outcome. If it is not there, to find out an exit. So this fatigue and feeling of escape is not helpful. The international community should be patient, not only with, I'm not talking about my country, with the situation that you need more time and also energy to fix it. I think we cannot live in a world where the 50% of that world would be in poverty and in trouble and in a situation that always need help. If we are not able to enable that part of the world would be very unstable.
Ambassador Tanin, all the best to you and into Afghanistan and to the negotiations of the Security Council reform.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us here on South South News. I'm Afaf Kanja. We'll see you soon.